What's up, what's up, what's up, everybody? You're listening to the Data is My Science podcast, the show that makes data your passion. I'm your host, Dapper Data. Today is going to be completely different from what we've done in the past, okay? We have our novice, we have our advanced listeners on the podcast. Now, we talked about supervised learning, we talked about AI, we talked about machine learning, we talked about all this goodness, right? We talk about why data science is important to the industries. We've talked to people who are doctors, pharmacists, you name it, right? Just to explain to them that data science and data is important, and it's important in every career. But we've never talked about data and related to the climate, right? And so that's something totally different, and that's something that we're going to talk about today. Data science has a key role to play in climate change. And I brought a special guest on. As you know, I always like to bring a special guest on. So from machine learning to data visualization, data science techniques are used to study the effects of climate change on marine biology, food systems, patterns, whatever it is, borne diseases, other climate related things. And so I brought a special guest on. His name is Gopal, and Gopal has served as CTO and head of product and Sust Global, a venture focused on geospatial analytics for climate adaptation. And most recently, he led the analytics engineering team at Planet Labs. So Gopal, tell them a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Bobby. Great to be here. Delighted to be talking to you all. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Gopal. I head up the tech and product functions at Sust Global. I'm a electrical engineer turned geodata scientist. Spent the early years of my career in multimedia and computer vision applications in the multimedia space. And then around 5+ years ago, got really interested in environmental data sets and fascinated by the impacts that the climate has on our livelihoods and human activity. I started studying that more. And through a serendipitous sequence of events, ended up leading the analytics and insights team at Planet Labs, where we were looking at terabyte scale data sets on Earth observation, multispectral, a daily revisit across the entire landmass of the Earth, and saw this need for translating that rich data into actionable insights into a range of different verticals where people can really make sense out of Earth observation data. And I got really caught with the climate bug maybe like 5 years ago, around that time. And I was just seeing that Earth observation can be a real uh, dimension of data around the changing climate because of the historic record of observations and the unique opportunities of bringing together climate modeling and Earth observation derived environmental sensing. And that's kind of what's led to Sust Global, where we are enabling the frontier climate modeling capability to be accessible and actionable to players within the financial ecosystem who are not climate data scientists. So that transformation and that gap is kind of what we're trying to fill. So yeah, that's what my team focuses on.
No, so, and that's awesome. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. When I did some research on SUS, right, a couple of things that came to mind or that actually stood out. If you go on the front page, you're looking at being able to solve some of those risks, right, that there are in when it comes down to climate analytics, and being able to transform climate complexity into business intelligence. So when you talk about those things, uh, what are some of the risks that kind of come to mind when you're thinking about climate analytics?
Yeah, so when people talk about climate data and analytics, it's kind of a broad swath at this point. But the most relevant one to almost everyone on this podcast is physical risk. So think about yourself, your community, your friends and family, and the impacts they've had over the last few years collectively from some acute or chronic hazard. On the acute side, it's fires, floods, cyclones. On the chronic side, it is drought, water stress, sea level rise, heat waves. And you'll quickly realize over the last 10 years we've all been affected in some form in our neighborhoods by this. So what we are focused on is the enablement of players within the financial services ecosystem and in the environmental, social, and governance advisory space to be able to quickly analyze the risk from a multitude of different physical hazards from the changing climate at their asset locations. So the thing about climate is many of the times people talk about it being a global phenomenon, which it is, and they talk about warming, which is central. But the real impacts of that is what does the environment do to us through the changing climate, and that manifestation are these acute and chronic hazards. So we enable an assessment of that across a few different climate scenarios, across a few different operating conditions at scale.
Yeah, yeah. So that's awesome, Gopal. I appreciate you breaking that down for us. Now, does that mean that we need like sensors in different locations and stuff? Are you all planting sensors in different locations to be able to capture the climate change?
We largely focus on the data transformation. So there
Oh,
is a huge collection of sensors that enable environmental sensing. Some of them are in space, some of them are on ground. So we tap into all those different data streams and connect them with global and regional climate models that provide
oh
um,
man.
all a huge time range of projections, all the way from like hours in the future to years and decades in the future. So that's the kind of projection capability that we provide.
That's pretty awesome because I always thought. So I'm going through my PhD right in data science right now, and the first thing I tried to do was say, look, for my dissertation, this was like when I first got into school, right? You got your 4 years worth of like a PhD or something, and the first time I got into school, I thought I want to predict floods. I want to predict something so chaotic, right? How can you predict floods, right? And I was like, oh, there must be sensors there and this and that. There must be like moisture. You got to look at, different like moisture in different places and stuff. And I say, you know what? They should put sensors on cars, right? Like that's the most traffic around different places, But I know there's more that goes into it, than just that. And and I think when I think about climate, I think about all those different things, right? You all are basically helping save the world, right? That's the way I look at it. When you think about taking the analytics from different sensors and things like that, that's related to climate change and understanding the impact of how climate change or understanding the impact of how the climate actually helps you, or not even helps you, but understanding how it actually impacts you throughout your life, right? No matter the age, no matter the gender, it doesn't matter. Like climate is always impacting in multiple ways that we don't even know, and so you're collecting all this data from different locations, and it's amazing to me that you all are really emphasizing and focusing in on something like that. So I wanted to really dive a little bit deeper, right? Like you have a background in being able to not just for sus, right? Being able to understand how an analytics engineering team is supposed to really look, how it's supposed to run operationally, right? The vision of where from beginning to end, and how it's supposed to start and finish. So what does that look like? What does an engine and like building a successful engineering team actually look like, right? We have a need for data engineers. Do you need data engineers in there? Do you need data scientists?
Yeah.
Do you need a chief data officer to lead the team? I don't know, right? Because I've only been probably the person that is a part of a team of analytics, group, right? But what does it take to build that team out?
Yeah. Yeah, great question, Bobby. And it's definitely something I've spent a fair bit of time thinking through and like implementing over the last several years. I feel being effective at analytics requires being very knowledgeable and very well informed about not just the data product that you have, but also how it interfaces with other data products. And that's That's kind of like the inherent baseline capability. So I see good analytics engineering teams being working very closely with the product management function. When we founded Sust, I deliberately took on the portfolios of product and technology, primarily because for a data product capability, those two need to work hand in hand and in tandem. I would add to that in terms of the engineering capabilities, you're kind of blending across research, infrastructure, and solutions. So you kind of need all those three dimensions to your team. So you need the data science capability, which is exploring models, exploring data sets, exploring potential new product features and outcomes, and prototyping them. You need data engineering and infrastructure to stand up those capabilities at scale. And you need I would say kind of application development towards having the front facing, customer facing views into that capability. So, analytics are only as good as the users that they support and the usage that they drive. So, it needs to span from conceptualization all the way to realization and usage. So those are the three functions that I feel are central, which are going back modeling, secondly infrastructure, and third that being application development.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, and from high tech roles to business facing experts, you have to start somewhere, right? Data analytics have become a key part of that business success, and what you're doing, is being able to build it from beginning to end, which is amazing. And it probably takes a lot of exposure, a lot of experience, and I feel like sometimes there's titles that are thrown out there, right? Is the data engineer is that data engineer really important and essential to the role of building the analytics team? Do you see what would you say the most important role is to building that actual team?
I would say the most important role there is driving the synergies. So I feel it comes down to recruiting and hiring. It's normally a function of
Mm.
the leadership in the team and also the product management function, which is inspiring the why across the organization on the product and the data and the technical capabilities that the engineering team is building. So I would say that's a very critical function. And I think it comes down to how do you bring in enough diversity, and by diversity, I mean thought diversity and background diversity into the organization so that effectively you drive synergies across backgrounds, across data dimensions, across technical capabilities. And then you have a more holistic team.
Hey, no. That's I think that's something that a lot of our listeners need to understand. That synergy portion, right? Somebody that's sitting there in that role that understands probably multiple roles, right? To be able to maybe at a high level, you don't have to dive deep into understanding data scientist and analyst, the engineer, whatever it is, but being able to understand multiple roles. So what would you say some of the top use cases are when it comes down to data analytics and when we're discussing climate, right? I've done a little bit of research on it, and I hear things like forest degradation, predicting extreme precipitation, right? Flood predictions. What are some of the top use cases that you see right now when it comes down to climate and data analytics?
Yeah, so when it comes to climate, we're starting with like a very broad canvas here. When people talk of data and climate, there are a few different um, aspects to consider. There is the physical dimension, which is the physical risk, and that's what we are largely focused on, which is understanding at a specific geographic footprint what's the exposure to different kinds of hazards and risks. There's the social element, which is the land use element, the population element, and how they're affected by climate, which connects into climate migration in an interesting way. There's data on carbon, which is carbon credits, which is MRV or monitoring, reporting, and verification of credits, and info on emissions. I would call that more carbon data. And then there is the economic elements, which is what are the um, the economic impacts from physical or economic losses from physical events.
Mhm.
What the economic impacts to commodities based on physical events across the supply chain? What's the economic impact to credits uh, over the course of time, and what does that ecosystem look like? So there's data in each one of them. So going back to what you asked originally, when it comes to data and analytics, maybe on the physical risk side, you see two dominant use cases. So one of them is I already have some infrastructure, I already have a group of properties I either own or operate in. Where is the concentration of climate change induced hazard exposure?
Mhm.
Where's the vulnerability and what's the modality there, and what's the distribution of risk across my assets for diversification? So that's more like the reporting oriented use case. We also see the use case around planning, which is site selection. So if a city is trying to plan multiple routes for transportation between two districts or between two facilities, then how do they define the route or the sites? And that site selection use case is front runner, which is you're trying to understand what is the forward looking impact that you're expecting to see from the changing climate, and how do you plan around that or adapt or put preventative or adaptive measures towards making those climate aware and mitigating forward looking climate risks. So that's the way I would look at it.
Yeah, I don't know. That's amazing. I'm sure that a lot of the audience um, really adapts to that because I did get a few of them that are saying, "Hey, look, what about geospatial data, right? What about that's more the advanced folks, right? They're like, oh man, I care about the geospatial data. I care about regional data. Do you see anybody really talking about identifying climate vulnerability regions, at all?
Yeah. So we are actually surfacing that. We have a bunch of upcoming collateral and a refresh to our website, which will have a fair bit of that information. And we're seeing a few nonprofits like the World Wildlife Fund, the World Resources Institute, the Nature Conservancy, all trying to provide different kinds of views into aspects of biodiversity, wildlife, critical minerals and resources, as well as nature-driven habitats and nature-based solutions in the space.
Nice, nice, nice. Well, look, hey, Gopal, I really appreciate you being on the podcast. Um, it's been an amazing experience. I think that we should probably do this multiple times. I have a board meeting coming up where I want to have some of the top people that are focusing on data analytics. They're focusing on how it's impacting the world, making a difference in the world. I want to make sure that you're on that board, right? I want to make sure that the company is on that board. I want to make sure that we're speaking about things that are changing the world. So, I thank you for being on the podcast. Now, I like to end with what I call a dope nugget or gem at the end of the day, and what I've learned today is that climate. When we talk about related physical risks, like the floods, the cyclones, things like that. Heat base, etc. That's an important aspect, and that is a difference maker right there. A lot of people who are focusing on climate change, they are focusing on those aspects. So they're focusing on collecting data. They're focusing on those aspects, and also tying the role to the products, right? The product manager, right? I think that's very important from my aspect. Being able to look at data analytics and tying that role to the product is important. And so, is there anything that you want to leave the audience with?
Oh, I am super glad we had this conversation. And, there's a lot, this is the golden age of geospatial data. So, folks who are interested in that, I think there are definitely some resources. Feel free to reach out to me or ping me. LinkedIn is the best way to find me. And Bobby's going to include that in the show notes and the collateral. I'm also writing up some upcoming blogs related to climate data. and climate-related insights that you'll all find very interesting if you find this podcast interesting. So feel free to follow me there. And yeah, thank you again, Bobby, for having me.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. All right, now let's get into this overrated, underrated game. Okay, everybody knows that I got this game from from Mark V. I really appreciate him, motivational speaker, and Gary V. Actually, sorry about that, and I like to play this game called overrated, underrated. Overrated, underrated. I asked the guests what do they think a topic is overrated, underrated, right where it needs to be, and then they get to choose whether it is that or right where it needs to be, right? All right. So, are you ready?
Yeah, let's
All
do
right.
it.
Coding,
Yeah, underrated.
underrated. Okay, okay. All right, I agree. I agree completely. Pop Tarts,
Overrated.
overrated. Not even the strawberry. I like strawberry ones, man. Um, Soda,
Soda, I would say the same. Overrated.
overrated. Okay, okay. Playgrounds.
Playgrounds, underrated.
Okay, okay, okay. All right. Social media,
Social media, overrated.
overrated. The printer.
The printer, that's a great one. I feel like I'm kind of stuck. I feel like
Is it right where it needs to be?
it's right where it needs to be. Yeah,
Okay, okay. Amazon, the shopping.
Amazon, right where it needs to be.
Okay, okay. Tea.
Tea,
Yep.
yeah, tea probably underrated.
Underrated. Underrated. Okay. And last one, American football.
American football, yeah, underrated. It's so much fun.
Underrated. Okay, okay. Hey, well, look, I thank you, Gopal. I appreciate you being on the Data is My Science podcast. Audience, as you know, I love to bring these special guests on. If you need to reach out to Gopal, definitely we're going to talk about where you can reach him at. Thank you, audience, for listening to the Data is My Science podcast, the show that makes data your passion. I'm your host, Dapper Data. Where can they reach you at, Gopal?
Yeah, LinkedIn is the best way to find me. Kindly, Bobby, if you don't mind, send over the link to the
Definitely will.
and then
Definitely will.
audience. Yeah,
Is there anything that you're promoting right now? Any conference or any book or anything like that you want them to, or just check out the website?
yeah. Check out the Sust Global website. Feel free to reach out, and I have a few blogs coming up that if you follow me on LinkedIn, you'll know about shortly.
Definitely, definitely. Audience, as you know, you can reach me at Mr. Dapper Date on any one of my social media podcasts and social media platforms. I really appreciate y'all tuning in. Thank you again, Gopal. I appreciate you joining the podcast. Thank you, audience. Love you. Peace.